All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Mashki, turn it up. Just I don't think it's on. Yeah. All right, we'll say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Baruch Hashem, a lot to do today. Good night, everyone. We begin by thanking our sponsors. Thank you. To thank Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all the Shimon Drushos this month in memory of Paul's parents, Shmuel ben Zechariah and Sarah bas Avrohom. And to thank Avraham and Shaindy Kelman for dedicating the Shurim this month in memory of Avraham's mother, Sarah Bryna bas Yehoshua Heschel. We thank our sponsors for their dedication and generosity. We hope to the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamos and Aliyah, and the families in Nechama. With that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, we have a really exciting daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Yud Beis, but we have a lot to cover. Baruch Hashem. So we are beginning from Yud Aleph on Beis 11b, and we are picking up Emir Hashem v'cheivan shemis abros. Shavuot says so it is approximately 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, about 15 lines up from the 15 lines down from the top. Sorry. So v'cheivan shemis abros. So remember again, we were speaking about the Gemara introduced this section by saying B'schus nashim tzidkanios. In the merit of righteous women, Klal Yisrael was redeemed. And we're seeing about the incredible, miraculous, dynamic activities. How when they drew water, again, fish came in the water. Water was in the water. Right? They would go ahead and feed their husband, clean their husbands, bathe their husbands, become intimate with their husbands, become pregnant. Now the Gemara says, V'chevim shem misabros, ba'os lavateyim. Now the women became pregnant, Jewish women became pregnant, they came to their homes. V'chevim shemagia zman moldehen, holchos v'yodos basada. Now remember again, when it came time for them to give birth, they would go to give birth in the field. Underneath the apple tree, Shneimar, Tachas hatapuach orarticha. Also, isn't that beautiful this Gemara is? HaKadosh Baruch Hu sholeach mishmei marom mishemankir umashpir oson kechai yezushem mishaperes hasavlad. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu would send down malachim to essentially act as midwives for the Jewish women when they gave birth, to go ahead and clean up the babies after birth. Shneimar molatayich biyom holedes usach. Lo kara sarachem mamayim lo rachatz l'mishi. U'malakid laim shnei igulin. And each malach would go ahead and bring, literally igulin is like a circle, but 2 cakes. Echad shal shemen, v'echad shal dvash. And the malachim would bring 2 igulin, these 2 circles, one of oil and one of honey, to be able to anoint the children, to feed the children. Shnei mar, v'yenekeu dvash misala v'shemen. V'cheven shemakirin b'hem, b'hem mitzrim, b'hem lahargam. Now remember again, so obviously, every Jewish child was in danger in Egypt. We'll talk about this in just a little bit again. When the Egyptians would realize that the Jewish women were giving birth, so the children ultimately again were in mortal danger. So what happened? It's incredible. So remember again, the Jewish women are giving birth out in the field. The Egyptians would come to kill the babies. A miracle occurred, and the children would become swallowed up in the earth. It's incredible. They would become swallowed up in the earth as a way to protect them. So the Egyptians would not relent. They brought oxes with plows to try to plow up the children. So now again, they were unsuccessful. So the Egyptians left. The parents also left. After the Egyptians left, sometime later, the children would pop out of the ground like blades of grass. As the children would get older and were out of mortal danger, I'll say, if you can imagine that scene, right? So the children would come back in groups, right? They would come back in groups to their homes. And when the Ribono Shel Olam ultimately revealed himself to the Jewish people by the splitting of the Red Sea, Heim Hikiru Tchila. These children, the miracle children, who were born in the field, swallowed up by the earth, protected by the earth, and then sprouted up like grass to be able to go back home afterwards, these were the children who recognized HaKadosh Baruch Hu first. Shene'emar Zekeri va'andehu. So this is actually quite incredible, because again, Rashi on the pasuk also quotes this idea. Remember, again, I will say in Az Yashir, incredible, we're going to say this in 2 days from now. Say this in 2 days from now, Shvi Shal Pesach. So remember again, in Az Yashir we have this phrase, Zekeri v'andehu, this is my God and I will exalt him. And Rashi already points out the idea of Zekel Ivan to mean that they were literally able to point to God. This is my God. So here the Gemara says, who were the people who recognized that, so to speak, on Kadosh Baruch Hu first? It was these miracle children, right? These children born in the field, initially tended to by the Malachim, swallowed up in the earth to protect them from the wrath of the Egyptians, sprouting up like grass, and then going back home in droves. So we'll say, so back to the Egypt story. So remember again, Paro said to the Jewish midwives. So Rabbi Shmuel, Chad Amar Isha Ubita. So Rose, I want to point out over here, remember, the Torah does not tell us who these midwives were. Right? Torah doesn't divulge their identity. Oh, I think I froze over here. Okay. All right. Chevron Zoom, do you still hear me? I'm frozen on this. 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay, Chevron, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Let's try this again. All right, so the Gemara says this: so ultimately, Hashem said, the Paro said to the Jewish midwives. So who were the Jewish midwives? Rabbi Shmuel Chad Amar Isha Ubita. One said it refers ultimately again to a woman and her daughter. V'chad Amar Kala v'chamosa. And the other said that it refers ultimately again to a mother and her daughter-in-law. Mandar Isha Ubita, the one who says that it's a mother and a daughter, Yocheved Miriam. This is Chaved and Miriam. Umandar Kala v'chamosa, the one who says that it's a mother and her daughter-in-law, Yocheved ve'Elisheva. Ultimately, again, it's Yocheved and Elisheva. Elisheva was the wife of Aaron. So Tanya Kimandar Isha Bita. So I'll say, according to the opinion who says that it was a woman and her daughter, the Sanya Shifra zu Yocheved. Shifra was Yocheved. V'lamanikra Shma Shifra. Why was he called Shifra? Why was she called Shifra? Shemeshaperes asavlad. Because she would clean up the child. She would clean up the baby. So the Gemara says, Shemishaparis esavlad. Good. Davar acher, other possibility. Shapara v'Rabbi Yisrael biyameha. Ultimately, Klal Yisrael had periovarivya. Klal Yisrael again multiplied during her days. Pua, who's Pua? Zu Miriam. V'lama nikrishma Pua. Why was she called Pua? Shaisapoa umotzi. Shaisapoa. Old Rashi says Pua means she would coo to the baby. She would go with the baby. Davar achar pua shaisapoa beruach hakodesh va'omer. That Miriam herself cried out in ruach hakodesh, and she said, "Asida imi sheteled bein shemoshias Yisrael." My mother ultimately again will give birth to a child who will go ahead and save the Jewish people. Good. So Parah says to them, Vayomer, B'yalad chanes ha'ivrios. So Parah said to them again, when you go ahead and you birth the Jewish women, if it's a boy, kill it. Kill it, my avnaim. So again, it says when they're on their birthing stool, what's the avnaim? Rav Chanan, simin gadol masra lahem. Paro gave them a simin. What was the simin? Amar lahem b'shash shekal ra'as leiled yirakosem mitztananos kavanim. When a woman is about to give birth, literally again, her thighs become stiff. Right? Mitztananos means cold and stiff, like stones. This tamri kedichsev va'ere beis hayotzer v'hine osem malacha alav naim ma yotzer zeh yerach mikan v'yerach mikan. Just like again a stone worker. Ultimately, again, he has a one leg on one side, one leg on the other side. Usdan be'emtza. Av isha yerach mikan v'yerach mikan v'avlad be'emtza. So when a woman gives birth, ultimately, one leg is on one side, one leg is on the other side, and she gives birth. In benhu v'amitin also. If it's a boy, kill the child. Simin gadol masra lahem. Ultimately, again, he gave them an incredible simin. What was the simin? Ben panav limata, bas paneha limala. If it's a son, the baby will be born face down, and if it's a girl, the baby is born face up. All right, Paro had this simin. So remember again, the midwives feared HaKadosh Baruch Hu and did not do as Paro asked of them. To which the Gemara says, now here's what's interesting. It says, they did not do what Paro spoke onto them. It should have said lahem miboile. It should have said to them, not onto them. Not only that, Paro propositioned them to engage in immorality, but they did not go ahead and accept his overtures. And they literally again caused the babies to live. Tana lo dain shleim misal. Not only did they not kill the children, but ultimately again they fed and took care of the children as well. So literally again they went ahead and, let me just shut this down, I'm sorry. None of this is working. Okay, Kodesh Baruch Hu has different plans for today. Good. So the Gemara says as follows. Ultimately, again, not only did they not go ahead and kill the children, but ultimately, again, they gave them mayim umazon, water and food. Vatomarna miyaldo, says Paro, kilo kanoshim, because the midwives said to Paro, the Jewish women are not like other women. What does that mean? Because it says kichayos hena. Now, what does it mean kichayos? So the Gemara says, my chayos, ilay ma chayos mamish. If Yocheved and Miriam were saying to Paro that the Jewish women themselves are like midwives, so the Gemara says, atu chaya milo tzricha chaya achrisi lo ladua. Doesn't one midwife still need another midwife to help her give birth? Ela amrula umazu kechayin imshallah. Rather, what they were saying was, this nation are compared to animals. How so? Yehuda gur aryeh, Dan Yehi Dan Nachash, Naphtali Ayula Shalucha, Yisachar Chamer Garam, Yosef Bachar Shar, Binyamin Ze'ev Yitrof, Dichsiv Beik Sivbe. So you see that many of the Shvatim themselves are compared to animals. So those Shvatim have their animal references. Delo Ksivbe. What about the Shvatim that are not explicitly compared to an animal? Ksiv Bey, it says about them, Ma'imcha levia ben arayos yavtza. Your mother is like a lioness amongst us. So you see over here that ultimately, again, the Jewish people are compared to animals. Now, what were Shifra and Yocheved saying? Just like animals give birth in the wild what were Yocheved and Miriam saying? Just like animals give birth in the wild without assistance, so too the Jewish women are able to give birth without assistance. The midwives feared HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore Hashem made them homes. What kind of homes? Rabbi Shmuel Chad Amar Bate Kuna Ulevia. One opinion says homes of Kuna and Levia, reference to Moshe and Aaron. The Chad Amar Bate Malchus. Others said monarchy. So Mandam Rabate Kuna Levia Aaron and Moshe. So the one who says that Shifra, that Miriam and Yocheved were giving Kuna and Levia, that's Aaron and Moshe. Umandar Rabate Malchus. What about monarchy? David Nami Miriam Kasi, because David HaMelech was a descendant of Miriam. Vatamas Azuva Eshes Kalev, Vayikach lo Kalev es Efrat, Vatela lo Eschor, Uksiv v'David David ben Ish Efrati. So we'll say, so again, amazing. By the way, they're both correct, that the reward for Miriam and Yocheved heeding the word of God and not really listening to the plan of Paro was that they were blessed to be the mothers of Kahuna, Levia, and Malchus. Pretty incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. V'kaliv ben Chesron holides azuva, Isha, v'es Yirios v'ala baneha, v'ala, baneha yashar v'shovev v'ardon. Okay, so let's analyze this pasuk. So the Navi over here identifies as Kalev ben Chesron, to which the Gemara says, ben Chesron, ben Yefunahu. Kalev wasn't the son of Chesron. I will say, remember again, we know Kalev ben Yefuna. His father was Yefuna. To which the Gemara says, rather what? What do we say? Ben Sheparame Atzas Miraglim. So I will say, ultimately, again, Ben Chesron was his real name. Ben Yefuna, ultimately, again, was the descriptive name. And what did it describe? It described the fact that he turned away from the counsel of the Miraglim. Vakati Ben Kenazhu, but still Kalev wasn't Ben Chesron, wasn't Ben Yefuna, he was actually son of Kenaz. T'chsev Vayil Kadeh Asniel Ben Kenaz, Achi Kalev. So what's you see over here that Asniel Ben Kenaz was called the brother of Kalev. So therefore, again, it's really Kalev Ben Kenaz. Amarava Chogro de Kenaz Haba. He was a stepson of Kenaz. So therefore, again, also the Gemara says his real father was Chesron. Yefuna, right? Kenaz was a stepfather. And Ben Yefuna was a descriptive name that he turned away from the counsel of the Meraglim. We'll say, Yud Beis Amud Aleph, Yud Beis, 12a, Daikanami Dichsev Haknizi, Shmamina. Fine. We'll say Azuva. Now remember, interestingly enough, it says that Kalev ben Chetzron went ahead and birthed Azuvah. Who is Azuvah? Rabbi said it's an incredible Gemara. Azuvah, Zu Miriam. Azuvah is Miriam. V'lama nikres, v'lama nikres shma Azuvah. Why was she called Azuvah? Rabbi said, now remember again, Azuvah literally means the forsaken one. So why was Miriam called Azuvah? To which the Gemara said, well, listen to this. Why is Miriam called Azuvah? Shakol azvuha mitrilasa. I will say initially everyone left Miriam. I will say, now what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. It's actually a pretty amazing Rashi. Azuva, shakol azvuha, shemetrila holanas haiseki dekari lehacha, yosel kaman kari lenami chalav azuva, shazvuha kol bachuri yisra miliso. So let's listen to this. Miriam couldn't get a shidduch. No one would marry Miriam. Right? Why? Because Lamaisa, she was sickly. She was sickly. So that's why Azuvah is a descriptive name. No one would marry Miriam. Shakol azvuha mitrilasa. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Therefore, again, the pasuk seems to indicate that Kalev married Miriam. The Gemara says, so why does it say Holid? Why does it say that Kalev birthed Miriam? V'alo minsav havanasav, like he married her. I'm Rabbi Yochanan to teach us an incredible lesson. Kalanose isha l'shem shamayim. Whoever marries a woman, I will say l'shem shamayim for literally again some greater cause, some greater calling. So what does the Gemara say? Ma'ala ala v'kasav kili yalada. It's as if he birthed her. It's as if he birthed her. In other words, I will say no one wanted to marry Miriam because she was sickly. Kalev saw that this is a holy woman. Look at her brothers. The Gemara says that if you want to know the quality of a woman, look at her brothers. Look at her brothers. Look at the family that she was brought up in. That's a pretty good litmus test as to who this girl is. So obviously, Kalev sees Miriam's brothers, who happen to be Moshe and Aaron. Kalev says, this is a pious, virtuous woman. He marries her. The pasuk calls it as if he birthed her, because essentially by marrying her, he gave her life. He gave her life. It's so beautiful. So Urios. Why does it call Miriam Urios? Shayu panel dominly Urios. Miriam was as pale as a curtain. Ve'ela baneha. Al tikri baneha ela boneha. Don't read it as these are our children, rather this is the one who built her up. Reference to Kalev, and these names are a metaphorical allusion to Kalev. Yashar, Kalev is called Yashar. Why? She yishras atzmo, because he straightened himself out and did not follow after the counsel of the Meraglim. Shovev, sheshivev es yitzro. Ultimately, again, he reigned in his Yetzer once again to go ahead and avoid falling prey to the Meraglim. Va'ardon sherada es Yitzro. Literally, again, he subdued his Yetzer. I'll say it's incredible, by the way. You just understand. All of these things are a reference ultimately to what? To the fact that Kalev would not follow the counsel of the wicked, of the Meraglim. So I'll say, which tells you how strong that pull must have been for Kalev to fall in line with the rest of the Meraglim. It's absolutely incredible. Others say, Al shayu paneha domin levered. Ultimately, again, that Miriam's face became like a rose. Le'ashchar avitakua hayushtei nashim chala v'nara. So once again, I'll say, who does this pasuk refer to? Ashchar zek Kalev. This refers to Kalev. V'lama nikra shmo Ashchar. Ultimately, again, why is his name called Ashchar? Shehushcharu panav betanios. Because his face was blackened. His face was blackened as a result of a series of fasts. Rabbi will say, why fasts? These are fasts that he undertook. In order not to fall prey to the Meraglim. Or really, again, according to Rashi, after the Meraglim went ahead and delivered their report. Rashi says, Shekiba lav tanios harbe shinat salmi atzas Meraglim. That he should be saved from the counsel of the Meraglim. Avi, shenasa la ka'av. He's called Avi because he became to Miriam like a father. Takua, shetaka slibal avishol shamayim. Ultimately, again, he embedded his heart to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hayu shtei nashim. He had two wives. Naasem Miriam kishtei nashim. Miriam herself became like two different women. Chala v'na'ara. Lo chana v'la rahavi, ella betchila chala. In the beginning, she was sickly. Ulubasof nara. And in the end, ultimately, again, she became like a vibrant woman. Ubenei chala saras v'tzohar ve'esnan. Saras shenases saras lachavrosel. It was like Kalev did such an amazing job, kind of nursing Miriam back to health, that ultimately, again, she became like a rival wife. Meaning, in other words, she became so beautiful that she rivaled other women. Sahar, shayu panei adamim kitzarayim. Her face became as luminescent as the sun midday. Esnan, why is she called Esnan? Shekalara osa molich Esnan liishto. She's called Esnan because ultimately, again, anyone who saw her became aroused and gave like a present to his wife so that his wife would be intimate with him. Incredible. So I will say, so just want to point out, this is a story I will say, not just our last part, but like this is just a story about Miriam. It's such a dramatic one, right? A young woman could not find anyone to marry her because at the end of the day she was sickly, and Kalev goes ahead and marries her l'shem shamayim, marries her because he understood that this was a special woman. She didn't check the boxes that everyone else had for shidduchim, but he saw the greatness in her, married her, and I will say again, gave her a new lease on life. It's incredible. It also tells you, by the way, about the power that a husband could bring to a marriage. That a husband has the ability, literally, to bring life to his wife. Everyone knows that a wife could do this for a husband. That's obvious. That's obvious, we know. I will say sometimes a husband underestimates the power that he has to give life to his wife. That sometimes when a wife is struggling, again, everyone knows when a husband is struggling, a wife absolutely has the power to pick him up. The koach of a wife can never be fully captured, it can be fully described. But sometimes husbands underestimate their power to be a source of life, to be a source of confidence, to be a source of rebirth for their wives as well. We see that from Kalev and Miriam. Incredible. So Paro commanded his entire nation. Now remember, again, I will say, this is a reference over here, ultimately, again, to Paro telling his nation, right, that ultimately, again, you have to throw every baby into the Nile. Some Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, Af al Amo Gazar. I will say there was a certain point where Paro not only decreed on the Jewish people, but what? Decreed on his nation as well. Everyone had to throw their babies into the Nile. Listen to this. There are actually 3 different gezeros. Listen to this. So the Gemara says, "Betchila im beinu v'amiten." So Rabbi say in the beginning, ultimately again, Paro just simply relied on the midwives to go ahead and kill the baby boys. Ulabasof kalabin hayilod hayorot hashlichuhu. Rabbi say then ultimately again, Paro went ahead and appointed like guards, right? He brought officers, enforcement officers, to ensure that the babies were thrown into the Nile. And what happens? Ulabasof af al amal gazar. And Rabbi say in the end, he even decreed upon his own issue. Say first wide line, Yud Beis Amud Aleph 12a. In the end, he even decreed upon his own people. Vayelech ishmi beis Levi. So Rabbi says, so again, what was a little bit confusing in this Gemara is we're jumping around in the timeline of the narrative a little bit. Okay, so what happens? So there was a man from Beis Levi. So where did he go? The Heschel halach. Amravida bar Zavina shalach ba'atzas bito. Rabbi says incredible. Where did he go? He followed the counsel of his daughter. Rabbi says, who's this talking about? Tana. Amram Gadol Hadar Haya. Amram, who was, remember again, Yocheved's husband, the father of Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe. Amram was the Gadol Hadar. Kevan Sha'ra'a Sha'amar Paro Harasha Kalabina Yilodayir Tashlichu. Once he saw that Paro said, throw the babies into the Nile, so Amar L'shav Anu Amelim. So Amram said, what are we doing? We're toiling for nothing. In other words, we're having families only for Paro to go ahead and throw our children into the Nile. So what did he do? Amad v'giresh es ishto. He went ahead, he stood up, he divorced his wife. So Amram divorced his wife. He said, what is the point of having children if our children are just going to be thrown into the Nile? Dukulan v'gershu es nishosein. So sure enough, after Amram did this, what happened? Everyone else followed suit. They also divorced their wives. Amrullah bito. So Miriam approached her father. Miriam approached her father Amram, and she said, Abba, kasha gzeirascha yoser mishal paro. Father, your gzeira is even worse than Paro's. How so? Sheparo lo gazer ala ala scharim. Paro only decreed upon the male children. V'ata gazarta ala scharim ala nekevas. And you ultimately, Father, your gzeira is on boys and girls. Boys and girls. Paro lo gazer ala ba'olam hazeh. Furthermore, Paro's gzeira is only in this world. V'ata ba'olam hazeh uli olam haba. And you, Father, your gzeira is in this world and in the world to come. I both say this is actually very interesting. What does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is almost right across. Rashi says, "Ela ba'olam hazeh shenoldim u'meisim v'chozrim v'chaimim le'olam haba. After gazarta ba'olam hazeh u'ba'olam haba shekevan she'inam noladim ein ba'in le'olam haba." This is incredible. Miriam said to her father like this: Paro's gzeira is in this world, right? The babies are born into this world, they're killed, but at least when they're killed, they go to olam haba. Father, your gzeira is in olam hazeh and olam haba. Both say, you can't go to Olam Haba without first coming to Olam Hazeh. So Miriam was saying something amazing. She was saying, Father, you're preventing neshamas from going to Olam Haba. Because at least if they're born into this world, even if they die, they get to go to Olam Haba. But by you divorcing your wife, not having any children, you're preventing those neshamas from coming into Olam Hazeh and then ultimately going into Olam Haba. An incredible, incredible yisod. There's much to talk about there, because I just want to point out, we use the term Olam Haba to really refer to a lot of different things, right? We use Olam Haba to refer to where you go after you die. We use Olam Haba to refer to the Messianic era, right? Here the Gemara seems to be saying is, we always assume that if you're never born, you remain in Olam Haba. Here the Gemara seems to be saying is, no, you have to be born in order to go to Olam Haba. Okay, a lot to discuss, not for today. So the Gemara goes right there. Para harasha, safek miskayemes gzeroso, safek miskayemes. Right, Paro's a Rasha, so maybe his decree will come about, maybe it won't. Atot tzadik, bevade shegzeros miskayemes. But Father, you're a tzaddik, certainly your gezerah ultimately again will be upheld. Shneimar vatigzar va'omer. So good. But I will say, because remember again, the words of a tzaddik always come to fruition. So I will say, this was the musar. This was the musar that Miriam gave her father. Amram hears it, and what does he do? So vayakam lecha amad vehechsir es ishto. So Amram listened to the musar of his daughter, remarried his wife. Remarried Yocheved. Dukulan v'echziras nishal seyan. Ultimately, going to say what happened. Everyone else followed suit. So I will say, so what happens? Vayikach, then it says, ultimately, again, that's what I will say. I just want to point out, that's why the pasuk says, coming full circle, Vayelech ish mi beis Levi. Right, so going full circle, where was he going? So the answer is, he had divorced his wife. This is Amram. Miriam gave him the musar, and then what happened? Vayelech ish, he went ahead and he remarried her. Vayikach, right, he married her. I'll say, by the way, I just want to point out, the dramatic nature of this story is that Amram listened to his child. I will say, most of us have difficulty accepting musar, and we certainly have difficulty accepting musar from people who are our junior, right? That's for sure. And certainly, again, musar from a child is a little bit unheard of. But remember again, Amram was the living embodiment of Ezu Chacham, Halo made Mikol Adam. He recognized that at the end of the day, his daughter was absolutely right. And to his credit, he heeds her advice. Now I'll say, what I will just point out something very interesting. Let's finish up. He says, Vayikach, Paul says he took her, It shouldn't say that he took her. Rather, what should he say? He remarried her. Right? He remarried her. To which the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda bar Zavina, Sha'asala Maiseli Kuchin, Hoshiva Ba'apirion, Va'aron. So we'll say, what happened? Vayikach means Aaron made a big chasana. He made a big deal about this, right? Let's say, Hoshiva Pirion means Yocheved sat like on a big college chair, right? On a big college chair. Listen to this. How beautiful this is. Va'aron u'Miriam miraktin lefaneha. and Aaron and Miriam were dancing in front of their parents at the chasana. U'malachei hasharis amru, the malachei hasharis came down and they sang, Eim habanim snecha. Wow. I'll say, isn't that beautiful? Right? The malachim come down and they say, oh, the mother of the children is so happy. Right? As Bas Levi. So we'll say, so I just want to point out, so we'll say, I so brought down a fascinating idea. Why did Amram make such a big chasana? Right? Why make such a big chasana? You could just have some herring and kichel, right? A little herring kichel, some Canadian club, right? And we're good to go, right? Why do you need to make a whole to do? So we'll say, so remember again, it makes a lot of sense. Why? Because Amram, when he divorced his wife, it made a big deal, right? What did the Gemara say? Everyone else divorced their wives as well. So Amram needed to make it very public that he was remarrying his wife. So I'll say, so therefore, again, he makes a big chasana in order that everyone should see it. And I'll say, I want to point out something amazing. The Mefarshim bring down a fascinating dynamic. If you go a little bit further on in Chumash, you will notice something fascinating, which is the tribe of Levi has much lower numbers than everyone else, right? Why? I saw something amazing brought down. Why? So we'll say, in fact, so the reason why is it appears that many of the men of Levi did not remarry their wives after having divorced them initially. As a result, the birth rate of Levi was lower than the rest of the Shvatim, which I will say is an amazing thing. Now, so again, remember, Amram is from Shevet Levi. So it appears that many of the men, the Gemara says, many of the men of Levi followed suit, divorced their wives after Amram divorced his wife. Avram makes a big chasana to show I'm remarrying my wife, but it appears that many of the men of Levi did not follow suit. Which I will say tells you something absolutely amazing. Sometimes in life, we do something and then we retract it. But sometimes, once you kind of put out there a certain mode of behavior, it's very difficult to dial it back. Now, I want to be clear. Amram didn't do anything wrong, right? Amram felt that he did what he had to do, given the nature of the decree of Paro. It's just one of these interesting things in life that we like to often think that whatever you do, you could always rein back in, and whatever you do, you could kind of always dial it back. And in life, you can't. The way it often happens is kind of once you put something out there, it's very difficult to rein it back in. Obviously, there are dramatic examples of this, like Lashon Hara, right? But even things not as severe as Lashon Hara. Sometimes you say something, and once you say it, we know this well, so it happens all the time, right? You could apologize from here until tomorrow. You can never take back something you say. You could apologize for it. You could be incredibly mournful and sorrowful about it, but you cannot take it back. Certain actions, once they're done, they cannot be undone. It appears that Amram was never fully able to undo the dynamic of having divorced his wife. An incredible yisod. The Gemara goes weiter. Afshar, and now calls Yocheved a Bas Levi. Afshar Bas Meir Shloshim Shana Havya. The Karle Bas. Obviously, again, people lived much longer, but again, 130 is no spring chicken, right? So why are you calling her Bas? Remember again, Yocheved was, just say how old she was. Yocheved ultimately, again, was conceived on the way down to Egypt, and was born when Yaakov Avinu first came down to Egypt. So Yocheved was incredibly old. A miracle occurred, and Yocheved became a young woman again. Right? She became a young woman again. Vatar Isha Vateled Bain. So she became pregnant and she had a son. So Vaha Havas Me'abra Beit Plus Yachim Ekara. Here's what's interesting. Yocheved was already pregnant at the time of this pasuk. So why does it make it sound like she's becoming pregnant now? Compares the conception to the birth, or the birth to the conception. Just like a woman conceives without tsar, so too when Yocheved gave birth to Moshe, the birth was without pain. Now remember again, before the days of epidurals, right? So remember again, so what does it mean that her birth, how could that be that the birth of a child was without pain? Listen to this. Makan, the Noshim Tzidkanios Shalo Hayu Bepiska Shel Chava. The boss says incredible Gemara. What do you see from here? You see from here, righteous women we're not under the decree of Chava, right? I will say part of the decree of Chava was be'itzvi tel dibanim. You will have pain when you give birth. Righteous women, ultimately again are not bound by the decree of Chava, and they have the ability to give birth even without pain. Pretty incredible. Vatera osa kitov. So also remember again, now Yocheved gives birth to Moshe. The pasuk says she saw that he was good. What does that mean? To which the Gemara says, Tanya Meir Omer Tov Shmo. Rabbi Meir says his name was Tov. That was the baby's name. Vatera osa kitov hu, that Yocheved named her son Tov. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Tovia Shmo, or Tovia Shmo. Moshe Rabbeinu's name was Tovia. But I just want to point out, just to understand. We call Moshe. I will say one thing is clear, which is that what? That was not his given birth name. Right? How do we know that? Who gives him the name Moshe? Basparo. So I'll say the Mefarshim already addressed this, by the way, about how the greatest prophet of all time is known by the name that Basparo gave him. So it's a whole discussion. In any event, the point is the Gemara says over here, Moshe Rabbeinu's birth name was Tov, or Tovia. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Hagun Lenevius. Tofu means that he was already fit from birth, right? It was already clear that he was fit for prophecy. Omrim, Nolan Ketshumal, he was born circumcised. Chacham say, B'shash Nolad Moshe, Nesmali Habayas Kula Or. Both is beautiful. When Moshe Rabbeinu was born, the entire home was filled with light. Remember again, that's what it means. Vatera also ki tofu. We're just trying to figure out what does it mean that he was born and Yocheved saw that he was good. So possibility one is that his name was Tov. Possibility two, his name was Tovia. Possibility two, she saw that he was fit for prophecy. Three, he was fit for prophecy. Possibility four, when he was born, ultimately again, the home was filled with light. Ksivhara, Vatera also kitovu. It says over here that she saw that he was good. O ksiv hasam vayar lakim esa'ar kitov. Okay, like Zer Shava. She hid him for 3 months, to which the Gemara says, listen to this. Interestingly enough, it appears that actually Yocheved was pregnant already at the moment that Amram divorced her, without even realizing it. Ultimately, again, she was pregnant. So ultimately, again, when he remarried her, she was already a little bit advanced in the pregnancy. The Mitzrim only counted from the time that he remarried her. She was already 3 months pregnant at the time that she and Amram remarried. Therefore, again, the Mitzvah will say, so she had 3 months in which she was able to hide the baby in the house. But she was no longer able to hide Moshe in the house. Amai, why not? If she hid him for 3 months, why can't she continue to hide him? Let's listen to this. Ella, kol heichad dahava shemia mitzri, the misyalad yunuka, memat yunuka hasam, ki heichid l'shamano me'avi ba'adayu. So let's say, listen to this. So apparently, dichsiv achazu lanu shu'alim kitanim. So we'll say, interestingly enough, apparently, the Mitzrim, how would the Mitzrim know if someone was hiding a baby? They would bring another baby, right? And they would bring a baby to the house, and the baby, the Egyptian baby, they would make it start crying. So I guess the way babies work is when one baby starts crying, what happens? Everyone else, if you ever see this, if you ever see babies in a nursery, right? It's an interesting thing. Where do you see this? I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason for it, right? But Lamai says so the Mitzvah had a very good idea. They knew Jews were hiding babies. They knew it. So what would they do? They'd bring another baby at the entranceway, cause the first baby to cry, and if there was a Jewish baby in hiding, that baby would be found out. So what ends up happening? So therefore, again, they had no choice but to put baby Moshe in a basket. So they take a reed basket. Maishna guma. We'll say, why reed basket? So in other words, why not make a basket of a more expensive material? So you see from here that tzaddikim are very careful with their money. They're careful with their money, right? Literally translated, their money is more important to them than their physicality, than their body. Because since the tzaddikim don't steal, therefore again they're very careful about how they spend their money. Now both say, I just want to point out, Pasha Pshat, Why did Amram and Yocheved not spend money on the basket of Moshe? Why not? Why not? Simple reason. They thought he was doomed. In other words, there was no havamina that they had that he was going to survive. You have to, like we saw in Chovas Halavavos, you have to put in your shtadlus. But just to point out, they just fashioned any kind of basket because the thought that their son somehow is going to survive this idea or ordeal, there was nothing further from their mind. To which the Gemara says, so Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Omer, Davarach, Shiyachal Lamum B'fnei Davarach, or B'fnei Davarkasha. So no, Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, no. They purposely made the basket out of reeds. Why? Because I will say reeds are soft. Reeds are soft. What's the good thing about having a soft basket? If it hits against something soft or hard, it'll rebound. Which I will say, by the way, is such a profound metaphor. You see, in life, if you're kasha, right? In life, if you're hard, if you're stiff, if you're rigid, if you're immobile, then what happens? When you hit against something else that is stiff, rigid, and immobile, what happens? You break. So I will say, if you're soft, if you're fluid, if you're willing to adapt, I will say, the greatest mashal of this, I always tell my children this. My children love the ocean. I love the ocean as well. I will say, when there's a wave coming, right? We saw this when there's a wave coming. I will say, so if you go ahead and you puff out your chest, right? I'm the man, right? Right? The ocean's not going to take me. I will say, what happens? You will get knocked over by that wave. Mashain came, if you bend your head, right? You bend your head, you go into the wave passes right over you. It's an incredible metaphor for life. If a person always has to be right, a person always has to stand their ground, a person is unwilling to collaborate, a person is unwilling to yield, right? You're the davar kasha, you're the hard item, you're gonna get smacked down. But if you're davarach, if you're a reed basket, if you're willing to bend your head, willing to compromise, willing to yield, willing to give in, willing to go with the flow, there is almost nothing you will not be able to overcome. Incredible Gemara. So let's go weiter. So the Gemara says furthermore, Vatach mira, bezefes. So they smeared it with clay and with tar. They went ahead and they put the clay on the inside and the tar on the outside. I will say tar has a smell. Right? So that Moshe Rabbeinu, little baby Moshe, should not be negatively impacted by the smell. So what happens? They put the baby into the basket and they put the basket in the reeds. So Rabbi Elazar Omer Yamsuf was incredible. Where was Moshe Rabbeinu set afloat in the Yamsuf? Now I will say, it's hard to reconcile it because remember again, the Yamsuf is a little bit outside of Egypt. Okay, but Lamaisa they put him in the Suf. So some say Moshe Rabbeinu was actually set afloat in the Yamsuf. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar no Amad Beis Agam. I will say Agam literally means like a marsh, but in this context it really means denial. Kedichsev kana vesuf kamalo. Vater bas paro l'chos hayar. So say bas paro. So remember again, you have to understand like the split screen over here. Moshe Rabbeinu is set afloat in the basket. At that moment, who goes down to wash by the Nile? Bas paro. Am Rabbi Yochanan Mishra B'Shem Yochai Melamed Shiyarda Lirchotz Megilule Beis Aviyah. I will say this was no ordinary washing. Rather, ultimately, again, why was she going down? She was going to cleanse herself of the idolatry of her father's home. In other words, I will say, I just want to point out what's happening over here. In the very moment that Moshe Rabbeinu is set afloat on the Nile, the daughter of Paro decides that she has had enough with the polytheistic, idolatrous, hedonistic lifestyle of her father's home. Right? That's the split. These two events are occurring simultaneously. V'cheinu omer imrachas Hashem es tzoas benos Sion ve'aroseh holchos. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Ein halicha zu el lashon misa. Halicha ultimately again could also mean death. What does this mean? V'cheinu omer hine anochi holech lamos. So ultimately, again, she sees the basket. So I will say, remember again, she's going down. Now, by the way, the Misa piece, we'll see in just a moment. Who's going to death, who's being killed, we'll see in just a moment. So I will say, so as she's going down to the Nile, not just simply to wash, but to wash away any vestige of the negativity of her father's home, what does she see over here? She sees the basket. B'soch asuf. We'll say first one line. Kelman the chazu the kabau la'atzulei l'Moshe. So I'll say, so now what happens? She sees the basket, and obviously she's ready to save the baby in the basket. As she's getting ready to save the baby, Amrullah Givir Asenu. So her servants who are with her say to her, our mistress, Minagino shal olam, the way it works in the world, Melech basar v'dam, when an earthly king decrees, so goes Gzeira im kala olam kula im mekaymin osa, banav u'bnei beisa mekaymin osa, va'at overes al Gzeira savicha. So they say to Basar, the way the world works is, whenever a leader makes decrees, one thing is for sure, which is what? People are going to transgress. But at least who keeps the decrees? Who keeps the decrees? The members of his own household, right? You're going to transgress the very mandate of your father. Your father said the Jewish babies have to be killed, and now you're going to go ahead and save this Jewish baby. Ba Gavriel v'chavtan bakarka. Gavriel came along and pushed the maid servants into the ground. Now, what that sounds like is he killed them. He killed them, right? He killed them in order that they should not persuade Bas Paro to not save baby Moshe. So Bas Paro extended Amasa, and she took the basket. What's Amasa? Rabbi Yehuda Menachemia. Chad Amar Yada. One says it refers to her hand. The Chad Amar Shivchasa. One says it refers to her maidservant. Man Amar Yada, the one who says it was her hand. Chsiv Amasa. Uman Amar Shivchasa, maidservant Midlo Ksiv Yada. Okay, it should have said Yad. But the one who says that Bas Paro sent the maidservant to retrieve the basket, you just said before that what? Gavriel killed the maidservants, right? The Shir la Chada. He left one maidservant alive, to lav orcha de Bas Malka la Mekam l'chuda. Because it's not appropriate for monarchy for a princess to be without a maidservant. Ulamand Amar Yada, Lichtov Yada. But according to the opinion who says that she extended her hand, so why not say Vatishlach es yada? Why does it have to say Amasa? It says wild. Hakamash malan dishtarvev ishtarvuve. Ultimately, again, what happened? About say miracle occurred, and Bas Paro's hand miraculously extended. In other words, she wasn't naturally able to reach the basket. A miracle occurred that allowed her arm to extend. Amar Mar. The same miracle that occurred with the hand of Paro. So we'll say Rashi quotes over here a miracle that occurred with the teeth of Og Melech HaBashan. Same, we're not going to get into it now, but same miracle that occurred with the scepter of Achashverosh, Rashi says. Right? The scepter of Achashverosh extended as well when Esther Malka went in. So we'll say, so a miracle occurred over here, so therefore Vatishlach as Amasa means what? She extended her hand, a miracle occurred, and her hand extended even further than possible to go ahead and reach the basket. I will say, so remember again, I've said this many times, the famous idea by the Lubliner Rav Meir Shapira of Lublin. Well, so even though I've said it before, we have to quote it, because we're learning Daf Yomi, the Lubliner Rav will say, so Lubliner Rav ask a good kasha, so we'll say, he says over here, Fatishlach Amasa means a miracle occurred and that her hand extended, Ask the Lubliner Rav, let me ask you, if something, right, we'll say, if I want a tissue box on that table over there, am I gonna reach out my hand to get it? No. Why? It's clearly too far. So why would, in other words, if Bas Paro needs a miracle in order to go ahead and grab hold of the basket, it means that clearly the basket was out of feasible reach. If it was out of feasible reach, then why did she even bother to extend her hand? And says the Lubliner Rav, what do you see from here? Sometimes in life, even when something appears out of reach, you still have to try. Still have to try. Sometimes in life, even when something looks impossible, sometimes in life, even when something, you look at something and you see, there's no physical way I can do that, you still have to try. Still have to try. And when you put in your effort, that's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes along and sees what you want to accomplish, what you want out of life, and the Ribono Shel Olam will help you achieve your objectives. Bas Power reaches out her hands, and essentially she says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to save that baby, but my arm only goes too far. But you know what the incredible yesod is? Where your reach ends is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu's reach begins. But you cannot access the reach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu until you exhaust the limitations of your own personal reach. When you want to accomplish something in life that looks, so we'll say, see, most of us, you see, the great yesod is most of us in life, when something looks too far, what do we do? What do we do? We don't even bother to extend our hand. And what Bas Paro teaches us is, just because something looks impossible, doesn't mean that you don't reach out. Extend your hand. My reach only extends to here. Got it. It's okay. Where your reach ends is where God's begins. But you have to extend your hand in order to get HaKadosh Baruch Hu to extend your reach. That's the lesson, says Albina Rav, about Bas Paro. Incredible. So we'll say ultimately again, she opened and she saw the child. So we'll say, Vatirehu. Vatireh literally means, and she saw him and the child. So the Gemara says, it should have said Vatireh. Or Rabbi Chanina, Malamich Sherasa Shechina Imo. It's incredible. She opened the basket. Rabbi says, she didn't just see Moshe. She saw the Shechina along with Moshe. Incredible. There was a nar crying. So Karli Yelad v'Karli nar. So we'll say, which one is it? Yelad means a baby, right? Or a young child. Nar already means like an older child. So what is he, a Yelad or a nar? Tuana hu Yelad v'Kolo kenar. It was the sign. It was a baby, but his voice was the voice of a nar. Dev Rabbi Huda. It's the Rabbi Huda. Amar Rabbi Nechem is imkein asisu l'Moshe Rabbeinu balmum. Then you made Moshe Rabbeinu a balmum. What? He's a baby with like a deep voice, like a nar. Ela Malamed Rabbi says, so beautiful. Sha'asta lo imo chupas neurim beteva amra shemalo eske lechupaso. Rabbi said, this is so moving. What's happening over here is in the back. Apparently, Yocheved had made Moshe Rabbeinu a chuppah, a bridal canopy. She put that bridal canopy inside of the basket with Moshe. And she said, you know what? I will probably never merit to see his chuppah. I'll never merit to see him grow up. I'll never merit to see what he's going to become. But again, ultimately, I'll put the chuppah in that. So Shabbos, I tell you something amazing. It sounds like from here that Yocheved did have some semblance of hope that her son would be saved. Shabbos, at first glance, it sounds like she had no hope. Number one, based on the fact that they made the basket from inexpensive material, at least according to the first opinion. Number two, remember again, who follows the basket along the Nile? Miriam, only Miriam. Remember again, Yocheved didn't go, Amram didn't go, no one went. And by the way, they didn't ask Miriam to go either, right? Miriam went of her own volition. So I will say, it really sounds like, so on one hand, it sounds like they really had no hope that he was going to survive. Then you see a Gemara like this, that Yocheved took the time to fashion a chuppah, put it in the basket along with baby Moshe. Sounds like she held out some level of hope that maybe somehow, some way, this baby would be found, this baby would be saved, and ultimately, again, maybe, just maybe, he would live to see his chuppah. We'll say, by the way, is this not like the story of the Jewish people? That we always put in a little bit of hope into the basket of hopelessness. This is the story of the Jewish people, right? Often I find myself, when I say Klal Yisrael, find ourselves enveloped in the basket of hopelessness, and yet the power of the Jew is to inject hope even into the basket of hopelessness, right? The basket of hopelessness floating down the Nile, and the chuppah representing that hope for a brighter future nestled in that basket. So incredible. So again, Bas Paro finds the baby. She has compassion on him. She says, oh, this must be a Jewish baby. So the Gemara says, Mina Yada, how did she know this? They both say, there's a simple answer, how did she know this? How did she know it? How did she know it? Because we'll say, there's a basket floating on there. Who else is putting their baby afloat in the Nile, if not a desperate Jewish woman? But in addition to that, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Shrasa Samo, he had a bris. He had a bris. That was another telltale sign. Rabbi Yochanan, Milamed Shnisnamno Shalom Idaita. Ultimately, I will say, also prophetically, she prophesied without even knowing that she prophesied. Zen Nofel, Ve'in Achar Nofel. That this was the last baby to fall into the Nile. Moshe was the last baby to be placed in the Nile. So what he's saying over here is that sometimes the nations of the world, they prophesize and they don't even realize what they're prophesying. How? So let's listen to this. Ra'u, now we'll say, why did Paro command for the babies to be thrown into the Nile? Right? Why water? Why not burn them, kill them, slaughter them? Why water? Watch this. Ro, because the astrologers saw the astrologers saw that the savior of the Jewish people would be stricken through water. His downfall would come about through water. Amdu v'gazru kalabein hayilot hayarot hashtichu. So Avraham will say, what happened? They got up and they said, throw the babies into the Nile. That right? Kevan d'shadju ala Moshe. So will say, when Moshe was set afloat in the Nile, solo chazinon ki ahizimna batul gzeira sayu. So we'll say, so what happened? When Moshe was set afloat in the Nile, so what happened? They no longer saw the Jewish threat. Right? Why? Because it was incredible. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was set afloat in the Nile. Based on their skewed prophetic vision, they saw the threat has been neutralized. Why? Because ultimately, again, the savior of the Jewish people has been put in the water. Now, what they didn't realize was he wasn't drowned in the water. He was set afloat in the water. So they said, oh, we no longer have to have the Gzeira. Moshe Rabbeinu was the last baby placed in the Nile. What they didn't know was Shamei Meriva Huloka. They both say they didn't realize that. Moshe Rabbeinu's end was going to come about through water, but it wasn't going to be the Nile. When was that, Rabbi? It was when he struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock in a place called Mei Meriva. So water was the downfall of Moshe Rabbeinu, but not this water. So Hema Sherau, it's Tadnine Paro Vito. Again, so interesting, the astrologers of Paro were partly right. Moshe Rabbeinu's end would come through water, but wrong water. But what is amazing is Moshe Rabbeinu was the last baby in Egypt to be thrown into the Nile, because when he was put afloat, he was put afloat into the Nile. The astrologers thought, "Oh, we've dealt with the problem." Moshe Sheshnos Alef Alfei Regale Amar Moshe Yisrael Bishvili Nitzaltim Kulcha. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, "You were all saved because of me." In other words, I will say, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I was the last baby put afloat in the Nile, and because of me, the rest of you were spared. I will say, now watch this. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa Amar, Oseyom. What says into this? The day that Moshe Rabbeinu was set afloat in the Nile, Esrim ve'echa b'Nisan. What will say? It was the 21st of Nisan. Or in other words, Shvi'i Shal Pesach. Shvi Shal Pesach was the day that Moshe Rabbeinu was set afloat in the Nile. So let's say, so just to understand over here, it wasn't clear. This goes back to what I was saying before. It wasn't clear that Moshe Rabbeinu was destined to survive this. Right? Just to understand. Remember again, Amram and Yocheved assume that Lamaisa again, Moshe is going to die. That's why the inexpensive basket, no one follows him. Watch this. The Malachi Asharis say before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, Misha Asid Lomar Shira Alayam B'Yom Zeh. He who is destined to ultimately lead Klal Yisrael in Az Yashir on this day, Yilaka B'Yom Zeh. So what's here the Malachim are saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, this baby This baby has such potential. This baby could be the leader. This baby could be the savior. This baby could be the one that in years from now, could lead this people in triumphant song on Shvi'i Shel Pesach in Az Yashir. And he should die on this day. He should die on this day. No. It wasn't Shvi'i Shel Pesach. It wasn't that. Rather, what was it? The 6th of Sivan. Wow. So the Gemara said, listen to this. Rambam said, what's the 6th of Sivan? What's the 6th of Sivan? Shavuos. The man who has the ability to bring down the Torah on this day, should he die on this day? So also, you see from here, by the way, that it wasn't Pashat when Moshe Rabbeinu was put on the Nile. We read the story, and for us, the story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? The beginning, Moshe Rabbeinu was born. The middle, he's put on the Nile. The end, Bas Paro sweeps him up and he's saved. And we take this as a given sequential order. It's incredible to see that as the events are unfolding, it's not clear what's going to happen. In other words, so the Malachim see baby Moshe floating on the Nile, and the Malachim, it's not clear to them what's going to be. They have to lobby HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They have to lobby Ribono Shel Olam. This is the boy who could lead them in Az Yashir. This is the boy who could grow into the man to bring them the Torah. Save him. Save him. Shabbos say, listen to this. So Shabbos say, now remember again, let's go back for just a second. How old was Moshe Rabbeinu when he was set afloat on the Nile? How old? 3 months. Now, watch this. If you say that he was set afloat on the 6th of Sivan, so the story makes sense. Mishkachas la gimel yarchei damar mar b'shiva ba'adar meis or b'shiva ba'adar nolad Moshe or b'shiva ba'adar v'achisha b'sivan t'las yarchi. So I will say, so now if you say that this happened on the 6th of Sivan, it makes sense. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was born when? Zayin Adar. So you have Zayin Adar, right? You have Adar, right? Nissan, right? I should say Adar to Nissan 1 month, right? Nissan to Iyar 2 months, Iyar to Sivan 3 months. Actually, both say it's actually perfect. It's actually perfect, right? Perfect. But if you hold that Moshe Rabbeinu was set afloat on the 21st of Nissan, so how do you have 3 months? How do you have 3 months? Because remember again, what does that sound like? Actually, what does it sound like? A month and a half, right? From Zayin Adar to the 21st of Sivan, it's the 21st of Nissan is a month and a half. I will say, watch this. That year that Moshe Rabbeinu was born was a leap year. Watch this. I will say, Rubo shel Rishon v'Rubo shel Acharon Tzayishlan. So I will say, why is it 3 months? Watch this. Moshe Rabbeinu was born in Zayin Adar Aleph. So you have Adar Aleph to Adar Beis. So Rabbi say, essentially what you have is like this. You have 3 months. Not 3 complete months. What do you have? Part of Adar Aleph, part of Nisan, and an entire Adar Beis. That's 3 months. In other words, 3 months doesn't have to be 3 complete months. 3 months just means, again, 1 whole month and 2 partial months. Incredible. So let's go right there. Shabbos says, so what happens? So now remember, skipping the part of the story where Bas Paro goes ahead and retrieves him from the water. So says, so what happens? So Miriam comes running, right? So remember again, so Moshe won't nurse. So Vatomer Achosa Bas Paro. So Miriam says to Bas Paro, Ha'elech v'karasilach isha menekes min Ivrios. So Miriam offers. Now remember, we'll say, you have to understand something. Everyone knows, right? It will say, see, so contrary, to the movie The 10 Commandments, right? So remember again, everyone knew that Moshe Rabbeinu was Jewish. And when I say everyone, in other words, Bas Paro knows that he's Jewish, right? Because Matiftach Vatero, she saw that he was circumcised. No one is circumcising their kids in Egypt except Jews. So she sees that he's circumcised. Furthermore, again, she sees that he's not nursing. So she knows he's Jewish. Miriam knows he's Jewish. So ultimately, again, Miriam says to Bas Paro, should I go and find a Jewish wet nurse? So what happens? So Tamar Chosel Basparo, Hayelech v'Karasilach Isha Menakis Men Ivrios, Umayshna Me Ivrios. So why a Jewish wet nurse? Watch this. Malamed Shechziru LeMoshe Kol Nisyos Kulan. So ultimately, again, so Basparo tried to find an Egyptian wet nurse to Moshe, Velo Yanak, and Moshe Rabbeinu would not nurse from a non-Jewish woman. Amar. Should the mouth ultimately again that is going to go ahead and speak with the Shechina nurse from a non-Jewish woman? Who will be the one who will teach knowledge? Ultimately, and so we'll say, so the Maisa again, Moshe Rabbeinu would not nurse from a non-Jewish woman. I mentioned this also many times. This is a halacha that's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, that if a Jewish mother cannot go ahead and nurse her child, what should she do? She should try to find a Jewish wet nurse. Right? Why? What's the makar for this halacha? Sotah Yud Beis Amud Beis. Moshe Rabbeinu would not nurse from a non-Jewish woman. So you see from here that a Jewish child should ideally nurse from a Jewish woman. I asked the Satmar Rav, Zechusa Yagin Aleinu. But the Gemara says, why wouldn't Moshe nurse from a non-Jewish woman? Why not? Why not? Because the mouth that is going to speak with the Shechina so this doesn't apply to a regular Jewish child. The Satmar Rav says, what do you see from here? Every child has to be raised as if he has the ability to become a Moshe Rabbeinu. Also, when we look at our children, we have to see limitless potential. When we look at a Jewish child, ultimately, again, what we can see is here is a boy, here is a girl who could become as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. Raise your children as if the sky is the limit. Raise your children as if they could become the next Moshe Rabbeinu. Again, becoming Moshe Rabbeinu is a relative statement. Moshe Rabbeinu became the best version of Moshe Rabbeinu he could. Right? Our children can become the best version of Moshe Rabbeinu, but they have to be raised to believe that they have limitless potential. Therefore, says the Satmar Rav, halacha l'maisa, this halacha is codified for every single Jewish child. If a mother can't nurse her own child, try to go ahead and have a Jewish wet nurse. Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't nurse from a non-Jewish woman because the mouth that would speak with the Shechina should only nurse from a Jewish mother. That same metric, that same potential applies to every Jewish child of the Satmar Rav. So the Gemara goes back to the Gemara. Amar Belazar, good. Malamed, I'm sorry. Tomer la Basparo lechi. So daughter of Paro says to Miriam, go and find a Jewish wet nurse. Amar Belazar, Malamed shaholcha bezrizus ka'alma. Ultimately, Miriam, who is not so young, that Miriam went with like alacrity, like a young girl. Rabbi Shmuel Nachmani, Amar ha'alma she'lima as divareha. Ultimately, again, she concealed her words. Rashi says over here, Shalo Amra Shiachoso Shimevias Imo. Also, I want to be clear. The Gemara says over here, Miriam never told Bas Paro who she was, that she was the sister of this baby, nor did she ever tell Bas Paro that the wet nurse was Yocheved. All right, we'll say, we will stop over here. Whew. What a morning! What a morning! All right, fine. One more piece. Let's get to the end. By the way, we're going to start doing daf after davening every morning. I'm going to ask you to quit your day jobs, right? Let's just do this. Let's just do this. So let's just go a little bit weiter. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, Shabbos says, I remember again, who becomes the wet nurse? Yocheved. So Yocheved now becomes the wet nurse. So Bas Paro says to Yocheved, take the child. Shabbos say, this is the second time now that Bas Paro prophesied, and she did not even realize what it was that she was saying. Helichi, we'll say now, we translate Helichi as, Bas Paro says to Yocheved, take the child. Helichi is a contraction. Ha Shelichi. This is yours. This is yours. So Bas Paro thought she was just saying to Yocheved, here, take and nurse the child. So, but rather again, Helichi, hey, this, Shelichi. This is yours. This is yours. So you're saying, the Ribono Shel Olam runs the world. And in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, Rabbi say, and this is very important as well, if it's yours, it'll come to you. As Rabbi say, in life sometimes we think that there's like one pie, right? And if Reuven gets a bigger piece, that means that what? You know, we'll say, like sometimes when kids are little, right? The pizza pie comes, and what happens? There's always that kid who goes for the biggest slice. Why? Right? Because lamaisa again, right? If someone else gets the biggest slice, then there's less for me. They'll say that's not how the world works. I mean, it may work that way with pizza, right? But it does not work. It does not work that way in the rest of the. She will say, in the world, there's not one pie. In the world, you have your pie, I have my pie. So when you get a lot of the pie, I'm happy for you, because guess what? Your amount of pie in no way impacts my pie. I will say this is such an important way, because sometimes we see people and they get things and they get bracha and we're jealous. Jealousy stems from the fact that I believe that if you get something, that means there's less for me. But in fact, that's not the way the world works. So we'll say, you've got your stuff, I've got my stuff. The more you get in no way impacts me, which is why we have to condition ourselves that when we see other people encounter success, we should feel happy for them. Because in no way does your success negatively impact or undermine my success. In fact, the happier I am for you, the better the chance that I'll get more of my pie as well. Because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and everyone gets what they're supposed to get. Rabbi said, what an incredible circle of Rabbi. I just want to point out. Rabbi said, by the way, how long did this take? I mean, I don't know how long it took, but I guarantee you, it didn't take more than a couple of hours. How do you know that it didn't take more than a couple of hours? How do you know, Rabbi say? Because Moshe's a baby. What do babies do? Right, cry. What else do they do? They eat, they sleep, and they go to the bathroom. Rabbi say, and they eat relatively quickly, which means that the baby's on the Nile, not for long. Bas Paro gets him. He's got to eat. He's not eating. So how long do you think it takes? So she tries this wet nurse, that wet nurse, this wet nurse. There's an urgency. Remember again, and Miriam's there. Miriam's there the whole time. Miriam was following the basket. And let's say, this entire thing transpired within a couple of hours. And let's say, see, you understand what happened over here? You understand what happened? Right, imagine the beginning of the day, on Shvi'i Shal Pesach, on what would be the seventh day of Pesach, Yocheved puts her baby in a basket, says goodbye, thinking she's saying goodbye to her baby, right? Within a matter of hours, what is she doing? She's holding her beloved baby, nursing him. Within a couple of hours. Hey Lichi, hey Shalicha, we'll say, the Ribono Shal Olam runs the world. And if you put your bitachon in him, chovas halavavos, you put your bitachon in him, he's got your back. Within a couple of hours of saying goodbye to her baby, she's holding her baby, her beloved baby, nursing him, literally giving him life once again. That's the world that Ribono Shel Olam runs. All right, we'll say. Oh, okay. I would say, first of all, Mazel Tov, we are officially caught up with the rest of the Daf Yomi world, and it only took us, how long we were doing this? An hour and 12 minutes. Not bad at all. I was saying, but what a daf. I will say, by the way, I did record 2 shiurim for Chovos Halavavos yesterday. They are posted on the Chovos Halavavos chat. If you're not there, let me know. I'll add you to that chat as well. I'll record today's shir as well. I will say, Shkoyach. Was it right?